So it's a real pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Professor Jonathan Burgess, who is very recently emeritus professor at the University of Toronto. He's had a huge impact, of course, on Homeric studies in Canada, and for me personally, his book on the epic cycle really changed my understanding of the epic cycle and Homer. He has a brand new book out on Odysseus and travel, and he's going to speak to us on that today. So welcome, Jonathan, and I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you very much. I might just sit down here so I can read right from the slide, and I also can control the slides.
You cannot control them.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning. My presentation is about a map that William Gladstone, the 19th century British Prime Minister, an amateur Homerist, made about Homer's conception of the world and the wanderings of Odysseus. On the screen is a beautiful picture I took of Ithaca, which is on the cover of my new book, just mentioned, The Travels of Odysseus. It is often seen as a paradox that Odysseus's true travel is relatively supernatural, and the false travel tales he tells are realistic. In this presentation, I discuss how this paradox has been interpreted in both academic and popular studies. Thank you. Slide. Okay, let me look here. Relevant to skepticism about the wanderings is a persistent desire to ascertain the real geographical locations of Odysseus's return. Practice that I have documented for some decades in my website, wakeofodysseus.com, as you can see on the screen. Next, please. Okay, great. On this slide, I show a row in my appendix on the lying tales from my book, recent book. Sometimes the lying tales are called the Cretan tales because Odysseus pretends to be from Crete in 3 out of the 4 major lying tales. But he does not do so in 3 shorter lying tales. So Crete is really only in 3 out of 7 lying tales. So I kind of think that it's a misnomer to call the tales as a group the Cretan tales. Okay. Woodhouse in 1930, however, argued that Odysseus was a historical person who, after the Trojan War, stopped at Crete on his way home, hence the prominence of Crete in the lying tales. I doubt this. The lying tales are not uniform. They differ widely from one another, as they shuffle different themes that Odysseus changes or he reshuffles. Okay, next slide. Ortelius. There we go. Here's some maps of localization. Here's an early one. This is the first known map of the wanderings of Odysseus by Ortelius at the end of the 16th century. It reflects popular localizations already, for the most part, normalized in antiquity, including in antiquity a small island for Calypso south of Italy that does not exist. So I can't use my pointer, but there's a Gigia right there. There's no island there in the real world, but they needed to put it there. They thought it was over in Italy, so that's what we get. Next slide. Okay, thank you. This is a modernized version of Ortelius's map. It connects the dots that show the sequence of the localized wanderings, and its presentation makes it easier to see the localization spots, including the invented Aegygia of Calypso below Italy, there in the middle. Note the prominence of Sicily. Supposedly, Phoenicia, that's where Phoenicia was localized to Sicily usually, with localization. And also, in the Odyssey, this is the island of Helios. And also, typically in localization, the home in different places of the Cyclopes and the Lotus Eaters. So that's a lot of episodes, Odyssey episodes for one island. but according to localizers, much of the wandering seemed to have occurred on or near Sicily. Next slide, thank you. Yes, Samuel Butler created this localization map for his rather good, I would say, translation of the Odyssey. You see here the common localization of the lotus eaters in North Africa, though Ortelius and some put them on Sicily. But Butler also localizes most episodes in the area of Sicily. And it's relevant that Butler wrote the book called The Authoress of the Odyssey, which argued that Homer was a young woman living in Sicily named Nasicoa. It's a delightful argument, no matter how implausible. And I kind of feel the same way about a lot of these localization theories. Next slide, please. There we go. This is a map by Tim Severin, who was a British explorer and historian who liked to retrace the journeys of famous travelers, real or fictional. On this map of the world of Homer, you see lots of notes and data, a common method of localizers to support their rather fanciful and slim arguments. It is helpful, however, that he uses green to indicate geographical areas mentioned in the Homeric poems. The Aegean world in particular, also North Africa, and Sicily to the west, though that we will see is debatable. Next slide, thank you. Finally, I show a photo of an amateur localization map on the island of Ithaca in Stavros, town square, which is Ithaca, and the Ithacans are very proud, of course, of their mythical ancestor, even as some try to argue that other islands were actually Ithaca, not Ithaca, which I disapprove of. Next slide. Okay, and here's the main topic of my slideshow. Here is Gladstone's map of the Homeric world and the wanderings. I found this in the only surviving copy of Gladstone's book on Homer in Robarts Library at the University of Toronto. You can see that the fold-out map is worn and torn. The original map had red coloring for the Greek Aegean world and dark yellow for the bodies of water, Okeanos, surrounding the world, and Thalassa, seawater in the middle of the world. Those colors are not so distinguished on this version of the map that I found at Robarts because the colors have faded a bit. Next slide, please. Here I show that Gladstone's map became very popular. It was reproduced in different ways, and I'll show you that sometimes it was changed and simplified. Searching online, I found a number of variations on Gladstone's map. Here you see the same map, but the two on the left have different shades of blue, not yellow, for bodies of water. I think it actually works better that way. The one on the right, which could be found online on Project Gutenberg, has no coloring except for the red for the Aegean world, but it is relatively high resolution, which is great because there's a lot of small words and phrases, both Greek and English, on the map. Next. Gladstone's map was often reproduced in simplified form, originally with Gladstone's cooperation. The ones on the left and right also gesture with lines and arrows at Odysseus' travels. You can make it out, arrows here, yeah, and Western Mediterranean. And the black and white one on the left seemed vaguely familiar to me. I had to think about it. Next slide. And eventually I realized that this map, or a similar map, this looks similar to the black and white one we just saw, was in Farr's Homeric Greek textbook, which I used in the beginning Greek course that I took in my last semester of college as a lark in 1982, never imagining that Homer would change my life. So, younger students here, be careful if you start to read Homer because, it may never leave you. Next slide, please. Great. Gladstone's map proclaims that it is a map of, quote, the outer geography of the Odyssey and of the form of the earth according to Homer. In a sense, Gladstone anticipated the modern concept of cognitive mapping. But the more we look at the map, the more we might suspect that it reflects the Homeric world according to Gladstone, not necessarily Homer. Next. The legend on Gladstone's map explains that 1, the inner or real geography is colored in red. 2, the voyage of Ulysses is shown by dotted red lines, and I'll provide close-ups of those and other matters later. 3, the outlines drawn in red mark places, quote, sufficiently known to be identified. They are also often transposed. This third comment is somewhat puzzling, and we'll have to deal with it in a moment. Transpose refers to Gladstone's quirky argument that Homer sometimes moved real places, like the Straits of Gibraltar or Scylla and Charybdis, to other places. Next, please. Okay. Now, I'm going to do this section by section. So here's the top section, so we can get at the details here. Hard to see, I know. Now, okay, here's the top section. I was surprised to find 2 Homeric lines on the top left curve and on the top right curve of Okeanos. You can't see it. I quoted here the Greek and the translation. Right, Okeanos, which is the freshwater river that encircles the world in Greek myth and in Homer. And you can see here we've got better coloring. So we've got dark color for water, Thalassa in the middle, and Okeanos on the outside. And so the lighter yellow or the non-yellow is land. Okay. The Greek quotation translates as, and he put on it the great strength of the river Okeanos, which ran around the outer rim of the well-made shield. Next. And you might recognize that quote as being from book 18 of the Iliad. Gladstone assumes Achilles' shield, book 18 of the Iliad, where Hephaestus is making the armor for Achilles that he's lost through Patroclus. And this is Homer's description of the shield. Okeanos on the outside edge. Okay. Gladstone assumes that Achilles' shield was rectangular, and so rather whimsically, he makes his map of Homer's world the same shape. It is relevant that some think of Achilles' shield as a kind of a map. And there's something to that. You can see on the left, I think that's from Wilcox's book. The boss of the shield depicted earth, sea, sun, and celestial bodies, whereas the rim had Okeanos, as Gladstone knows. These together could serve as a rather simple map of the world or the mythological world. But most of the described scenes on the shield of Achilles, of course, as you know, involve typological activities of human life. So most of it is not really a map, I would say. And we actually don't know what shape Achilles' shield was. Next, please. Back to Gladstone's map. In the top section, we see the upper part of Thalassa, the saltwater sea in myth. It is in the middle of the map in dark yellow. Dotted lines of Odysseus's travels are shown on it, and I'll show you close-ups of that later. In the middle of Thalassa is its name, with the epithet athesphatos, not spoken or amazing. Next, please. Next. Oh, you got it, thanks. Here is a close-up of the label of Thalassa. One of Gladstone's red dashed lines where Odysseus's travels runs through it. Gladstone also cites the line in the Odyssey that has this phrase, Thalassa athesphatos. You can see it's Odyssey 7, 273. Next, please. In the middle of the top of Okeanos is the phrase Loetra. Sorry. Now, that's the one I'm at. Thank you. My fault. In the middle of the top of Okeanos is the phrase Loetra Okeanoiol, which translates as baths of Okeanos. The phrase refers to the Homeric conception of the setting sun taking a bath in the ocean. So interesting that Gladstone throws these things in here and there. Next slide, please. Again, the lighter yellow between Okeanis and Thalassa represents land. At the top left corner, we see the city of the Laestrygonians, and we'll take a closer look at it next. Here's the close-up. Laestrygonian Telepolis intrudes into Thalassa. Thalassa is not on yellow here. There's no color, but it's on the right. Land is on the left. As a multi-headed peninsula, the Greek quotation is Odysseus' description of the Laestrygonian city in Odyssey, Book 10. I show you the Greek and its translation. I am puzzled to see the Laestrygonian location in red outline, since Gladstone employs this to designate, quote, places sufficiently known to be identified. The giant cannibal Laestrygonians do not live in the real world. Perhaps Gladstone takes the Homeric description of its constant light. Odysseus states that herdsmen could work around the clock to mean that it reflects a geographical area near the polar zone, apolar zone, where half the year is constant light and half constant darkness. We will see that the Cimmerians are said to live in constant darkness. Next, please. At times, Gladstone seems artistic in his arrangement of information on the map, or creative. On the right side of the map, top map, there is a winding quotation of Odysseus' description of the Cimmerians, as told to him by Circe, who live near Okeanis in perpetual darkness. On the left, in the uncolored portion close-up, you see it just starts there, the phrase Ampha de Cimmerian, the people of the Cimmerian, and then the people of the Cimmerian peoples and their city, etc. And then it's a long quote. So on the right, you see with the color that it has to wind up sideways and eventually goes to the curve upside down. I find it amusing. Thank you. Next one. Elsewhere in the map, Gladstone also wonders if the Cimmerians are lower than that, if still near Okeanis. So here in this section, which is down below, where he showed the Cimmerians earlier, he says, sideways, Cimmerioi Andres, Cimmerian men? Question mark. That's interesting. At least he shows a little bit of doubt and wonder now and then in this otherwise rather declarative and almost arrogantly produced project to describe the Homeric world in detail. Here you see Laestrygonian Telepolis again in the top left corner, with dotted lines for Odysseus' travel to and fro. Aeolus' island is directly below, to the left. We need to move one. Right? Yeah, sorry. And so Nasus Aeoliae, Flote is there to the left. And then a little bit higher to the right, we've got Ogygiae, Nasus Island. So Calypso's Aegigia. Excellent. And we have dotted lines for Odysseus' travel to and fro. Descriptive Greek phrases of these places, of these two islands, are also provided in the map. Next, please. Okay, here's the whole map again. And now we're going to turn to the middle section, the Aegean world. Next, please. Great. This is the Greek world of the Aegean in red. That is the Greek peninsula and the coast of Asia Minor, where Greeks inhabited, which Greeks inhabited. Not much is beyond the coast of Asia Minor, except for the Solomon Mountains and the Solamite people. Crete, down below here in red, serves as a lower border of the Aegean world. The Levant, with Phoenicia and Sidon, comes into view on the lower right, also Cyprus. Next. In this section, there are frequent references to Homeric ethnography. Gladstone's interested in that. I'm glad to see e.g., the horse milkers up at the top, Hippemogoi, it goes on, Galactovagoi, the horse milkers, the cheese eaters up in the north of Greece, the Greece Peninsula. Okay. Next, please. To the northeast, and this is going to blow your mind, I'll tell you. To the northeast on the center map, we see an extended and widened Hellespont. This turns north to reach the Black Sea or the Euxine. It seems like the Hellespont is being equated with the Sea of Marmara, which is seen to the left in its proper easterly and westerly direction. Where Gladstone's Hellespont meets the Black Sea, we can see Phoenicia. See this in the close up there, and the Greek there is sideways again. Phoenicia Island, and we see that Phoenicia is the island of the sun, and the Odyssey is in the middle of the opening between the Hellespont and the Black Sea. Yes, and Scylla is on one side of Phoenicia. You can see it's written in English, and then the Planctai, the wandering rocks in Greek, are on the other side. No sign of Charybdis here. Next, please. On the center right, there is the Sea of Azov flowing from the Euxine. And below, into the Caspian Sea, it flows. And below the Caspian Sea is the Persian Gulf, which is much in the news lately. These bodies of water serve as the eastern leg of Okeanos, the rectangle outside the map, according to Gladstone. Note again the red border, which Gladstone employs to designate real places that have been moved or transposed. So, yes, Caspian Sea, the Persian Gulf, these are real places. Below you see these bodies of water as they look in the real world. So obviously, Gladstone is imagining different shapes for these bodies of water, and also in the real world, these bodies of water are not connected and are very far apart from one another. Next, please. There are, to the center left, surprises. Sicania and Cyclopes are designated on an isolated boot of the Italian peninsula on this map. There's no Sicily. And in fact, Homerists are not sure whether Sicania in the Odyssey refers to what we know as Sicily. To the right of the heel is Scheria, the island of the Phaeacians, usually localized as Corfu. Surprisingly here, close to the Italian boot. Next, please. Note especially that the Mediterranean thalassa joins the thalassa in the upper section, right? So on the next slide, I guess, yeah, there's no continent between that boot of Italy and no continent above the Greek mainland, right? So could you go back one slide? Thanks. Yeah, so you could see with those arrows, you could just sail up to Upper Thalassa, which takes up most of the world, according to this map. Okay, 2 slides forward. Now we're looking at the lower part of the map, and this is a colored map that shows on or near the African coast, lotus eaters, that's up here in Greek, Libya, with the phrase here in the middle, and also the Nile and Egypt, to the right. Next slide. Below this, we find Ethiopians, Greek there, with a little bit of a phrase, and both east and west, as Homer specifies in the Odyssey, first book. And we have pygmies down here, Andres Pygmaioi, mentioned only once in Homer, I believe, and this is Iliad 3:6. So that's interesting. And then finally, we have the Aremboi, another sort of unknown to us ethnographic people that Homer goes out of his way to mention. Next, please. In sum, Gladstone's map is an interesting mix of real and imagined geography. It also displays detailed knowledge of Homer. However, I would say it is more a mental map of Gladstone than Homer. And finally, I thank you. And I show you in this last slide, the real Ithaca next to Cephalinia. This is a little doodle that Jane made of me, showing a slideshow, and then on the back there you can see her version of Gladstone's map.
His birthday card.
Yeah, very good. I think I have bibliography if you want to go ahead. And otherwise, I'm ready to, take questions if there's time for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a reminder that it's possible for a prime minister to have a deep knowledge of Homer, however imperfectly so.
Back in the 19th century Brits, they were very well trained in the classical world, right?
So this is something I'd never seen before, and I'm sure that's the case for many people, but I'll open the floor to questions, please.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. In the book itself, does Gladstone talk about his logic of creating this map or display any kind of uncertainty?
The book is kind of a compilation of many essays he's published. They're more like essays. You might have heard of the one where he claims that there's no word for blue in the Homeric poems because humans at that time, the time of the poem or the time of the Mycenaeans, I don't know, had not yet developed in their eyes knowledge of the color blue. Right? So this is the age of Darwin, right? But a very misleading view of Darwin. I'm sorry. What was I supposed to answer?
Does he discuss his thinking process?
Yeah. So yes, there is an essay called, I think, simply Thalassa, which goes through it. It's not that long, but he does give you hints about his thinking, very generously, I'd say, because sometimes I'm saying, well, this isn't right, or this is kind of really out there. I kind of like the map and being out there, right? He's basically, I do object to him saying, this is what Homer really thought. This is a map in Homer's head. It's in Gladstone's head, and it's a lot of fun. That's my attitude. Yes, please.
When trying to create some sort of almost, I know it's impossible, some sort of approximation of ground truth for the actual areas in the Odyssey, do these academics go towards other poems that reference similar places? For example, the Aeneid with the underworld, that sort of thing.
In the ancient world or modern world?
Ancient world.
Ancient world. In the ancient world, I, in my opinion, you can look at my website, which is decades old, so I might not be conversant with it, all its details now. Ancient world, it tends to be, they localize certain sites all by themselves. And usually the people around the area, people living near north of Naples said, hey, this mountain by the town now called Circeo is Circe. That's where Circe was, and probably building on Hesiod, which seems to suggest that Circe and Odysseus had children in the West. So, but I don't know of, you could get to Strabo, I suppose, and other people who try to string it all together. But yeah, usually I think it's a local thing. A matter of pride, maybe a matter of ancient tourism, and certainly a matter of modern tourism today.
Thank you.
Please.
It's fascinating, and it will take me a lot of time to take in all these confusing details. And when you say mental map, I think more of the type of map that we find in Tolkien's Middle-earth. It's so remote from reality, because when you start relocating seemingly or assumedly known places and put them elsewhere, you create something completely different and confusing. And I'm still musing about whether Gladstone thought that this is precisely what Homer was doing, or whether it was his attempt of making sense of the various indications. So that's still the principle that I'm trying to understand that's behind.
Right. Well, let me go back to the previous question about his writing on it, Thalassa, the essay. And there he does make clear that he portrays Homer as someone who knew the Aegean. So the red is known to the Greeks, but also by Homer, whether by in person or by report. And then he suggests that everything else is by report. And went around asking merchants and pirates and sailors about it. And in particular, he might have had Phoenician at his time. He dates him rather earlier than we would, Homer. Phoenician sources, and the Phoenicians, as you know, were way ahead of the Greeks in getting to know all of the Mediterranean. And we'll hear you talk later more about the Black Sea and the Euxine. But he doesn't really put the wanderings up there as some people do. Does that answer your question? Yeah, maybe you want to find this book. I used to have one, and I retired and I had to clear out my office, so I think I gave it away. But the fold-out map is online, as I said.
But you said there was only one remaining copy of the original edition
in Robarts.
So.
We might have it in our department library. I didn't look. It's pretty worn out, yeah. Which kind of attracted me. It's sort of it's a weird map, and it's worn out, and it's by this 19th century guy, and I really enjoyed looking at it. And despite my criticism, which are valid, I enjoy it as a project, as an imaginative project.
Could I ask just briefly again, in terms of what he said about the project? I mean, in a way, we're talking about creative engagement with Homer. This is obviously creative engagement with Homer, but does he talk at all about engagement with scholarship at all in his understanding of what's happening, or is this really his own foray?
I remember him referring to other people, maybe ancient geography people, authors. He does point out that he's something like, I've read the Iliad front to back 40 times in the Greek, and the Odyssey 35 times in the Greek. So he is, and as you mentioned, he was well educated, as people of his class were at the time. So he's keen to say, well, I know the primary work very well, but then the rest is imaginative, as I said. Imagining what Homer did, where he lived, where he visited, who he talked to.
Well, let's thank Jonathan once again for a wonderful presentation.